Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. One thing that we are seeing a lot in recent weeks is a lot of key experts coming out and essentially expressing their concerns for the current market conditions that we find ourselves in. One massive and prominent voice that we've seen in the last couple of days has actually been the CEO of BlackRock, who is of course Larry Fink. We've covered him in detail before, and he said that he basically believes that the world could already be in a recession and that we could be looking at another 20% decline from current levels. And this was only published a week ago. So there are a number of reasons for that, and we've covered that in its own video. But he's not the only person suggesting this, as we've actually seen Dan Ives also talking about Trump's tariffs, speaking about how they are, quote, the biggest debacle ever seen in the markets. Now this is really quite big news, and again we're seeing so many people now coming out and saying these sorts of things, so much concern being expressed all across the markets in all different areas, and again kind of rightly so. So let's have a little bit of a read, let's find out what the latest is. So yeah, the technology sector could face a decade-long setback from the latest round of tariffs on China and Taiwan if implemented in their current form, Wedbush analyst Dan Ives warned on Saturday. US stocks plunged at the time of this article being written. As we all know, massive declines that we saw. We saw the Dow Jones dropping over 2,000 points, 5.5%, its worst day since June 2020. And that follows a 1,600 point decline on the Thursday. It was a really incredible time. Same was true with the S&P, same sort of decline, worst levels since 2020. Now what we're seeing from Dan Ives is that if these levels and these tariffs in their current form, that is, hold, there is no debate. It would set the US tech world back a decade, in their opinion, whilst China would be the clear winner. And there's no debate, I've said in a client note. The US is 4% of the world's population and 26% of its GDP because of the US consumer. And we ultimately believe it's one of the biggest assets in the country, and in the tech world and Silicon Valley. Now, Ives pointed out that progress made by American firms in artificial intelligence, naming companies like Nvidia, Microsoft, OpenAI, Amazon, Alphabet, and essentially a few others, right? For the first time in 30 years, the US is ahead of China when it comes to AI and its fourth industrial revolution, he said. But one day, this tariff policy, if enacted, will create an upside-down supply chain, massive costs, major CapEx delays due to uncertainty and slowdown in US tech innovation. Not a debate. Drawing on more than 2 decades of covering the sector, Ives called the proposed tariffs the biggest debacle the markets have ever seen and labelled it a purely self-inflicted issue by Trump. It's very easy to say, build America behind microphone in the Beltway, he added. But the reality is so much different. It's almost a scary concept. It takes 4 to 5 years to build a factory in the US. US labour force and cost structure goes against the entire concept of the modern supply chain. Ives warned that the 50% tariffs on Chinese and 32% tariffs on Taiwanese goods could effectively shut down the US tech sector. So this is really quite crazy. And just for a bit of an example of this, okay, the suggestion is if we look at something like an iPhone, iPhones made in the US would be significantly more expensive, costing about $3,500 in opposed to the $1,000 as of current. And the trade and AI revolution would be significantly slowed down. The economic pain that will be brought by these tariffs is hard to describe. The reciprocal tariffs would cause an economic Armageddon and stop US tech world in its tracks. What a crazy suggestion, right? What an absolutely insane proposal. And this is the thing, it's not really that insane for, of course, Dan Ives to think this. I'd actually kind of see where he's coming from with this. I think it's a fairly reasonable stance to take. But this should be seen as a massive warning. That's a big thing about this tariff debate. It seems, just looking at it externally, to not be that well thought through. We're seeing massive swings in the markets. Investors don't like this. We are seeing companies, we've covered so many companies, right, where the CEOs, where big management people are warning that these tariffs, if implemented as they are being proposed at the minute, and if a trade war comes, could have a massive detrimental effect, mainly to the US consumer, mainly to the US companies. It would not necessarily be as beneficial as first estimated. And do bear in mind, like Dan Ives said, in the current market, it is unfortunate, but the truth is, if these things were to be made in Western countries where wages are quite high, could we make them for the same prices? If we're looking at iPhones being costing as much as $3,500, and the impact that we are seeing potentially coming for cars in cost, the impact on so many things. Is it realistic? Is it viable that these tariffs can work? Have they been thought out at all? And who will they help? It seems that a lot of these policies look like they would have a massively negative impact, basically to all parties involved. And we're seeing so many people now coming out and issuing warnings around concerns for so many big brands. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, guys. Make sure to leave me a comment telling me your thoughts in the comment section, and thank you for watching the video all the way till the end. See you again soon. Goodbye.